Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening: a sharp sell-off on Dalal Street as the sensex and the nifty end at the low point of the day. Mid-cap see deeper cuts. All sectoral indices close in the red. The rupee sinks to a new low against the dollar. ITC shares trade excluding its hotels business. The stock opens 26 rupees below Friday's closing price. ITC Hotels is expected to list by the middle of February, with shareholders getting 1 share of the hotel business for every 10 shares of ITC. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw defends the proposed law requiring parental consent for those below the age of 18 to access social media and e-commerce platforms. Industry will get 2 years to comply with new rules. Minister adds India does not need data protection laws similar to Europe, which he says is stifling competition. The government will launch the second round of PLI scheme for the steel sector. Sources say the total outlay would be around 4,300 crore rupees. The new tranche would lay greater emphasis on manufacturing of specialty steel and electrical steel. Finance Ministry approves an outlay of 25,000 crore rupees for a PLI scheme to promote domestic electronic component manufacturing. Sources say the scheme will be announced in the budget and could attract investments of over 45,000 crores. The electronic component industry had sought an outlay of 40,000 crores. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman meets trade unions as pre-budget consultations continue. Also meet representatives from infra and energy sectors in the 9th round of meetings ahead of the budget. At least 8 security personnel and a driver were killed after a police vehicle came under attack by suspected Maoists in Chhattisgarh's Bijapur district. Police say an improvised explosive device was used to blow up the vehicle. Police claim to have arrested the key accused in the murder of 32-year-old journalist Mukesh Chandrakar in Chhattisgarh's Bastar district. Chandrakar had reported on the alleged nexus between the administration and criminals through his YouTube channel called Bastar Junction. The Union Health Ministry says there is no link between cases of HMPV virus detected in Bengaluru and the infections reported in China. 2 infants in Bengaluru have no travel history. 1 infant is recovered and has been discharged, and another is recovering as per health officials. BJP targets Arvind Kejriwal after a CAG report shows the cost of building the official residence of the Delhi Chief Minister went up from the initial estimate of under 8 crore rupees to more than 33 crore rupees. AAP terms the allegations a diversionary tactic ahead of the elections. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is likely to step down ahead of the scheduled vote of no confidence later this month. His party fell into a minority after a key ally withdrew support last month. Well, let's start with the market action. It turned out to be a manic Monday on the Dalal Street. The sensex lost over 1,200 points, dropping below 80,000, and the nifty lost nearly 400 points in what was broad-based sell-off that we saw today. So that's the story for the nifty, down almost 400 points, 1.5% lower. The sensex losing 1.5%, 1,258 points lower, 1,500 gone on the mid-cap index, and the Nifty Bank also losing about 2%, a cut of 1,000 points there. So across the board, as we were pointing out, selling pressure this afternoon. Rupee standing by now to wrap up the market action. So Rupee, a bad start to the week, no other way of putting it. What are the triggers, the factors that the market is dealing with?
Well, it was quite a manic Monday on the street, with the Nifty actually having a trending down day. And why just the Nifty, the entire market? There was just no looking back. The selling started right from the word go at 9:15 and it just kept tumbling down. The fall was also completely across the board. It was cutting across sectoral lines. It didn't matter whether you're looking at large caps or mid caps. In fact, mid caps fell even more. There were almost 10 stocks declining for every one that was advancing. That was the extent and the nature of the fall today. No point in really naming too many individual stocks because it's a very wide fall that we've seen. But anyway, for reference, let's talk about the biggest Nifty losers. Trent, Tata Steel, BPCL, NTPC, Coal India. These were some of the weakest names. Actually, the fall was led by PSUs, both PSU banks as well as overall CPSE stocks. They were all really weak, and global commodity stocks were also facing plenty of headwinds. Then come the big boys. Stocks like Reliance didn't offer any comfort. A lot of the BFSI updates that came in over the weekend, that didn't really help matters. So whether it was IndusInd Bank, HDFC Bank, SBI, a lot of these stocks, Kotak Mahindra Bank, all of them under a lot of pressure today. The gainers were actually only 2 or 3 on the Nifty. Apollo Hospitals up and about, some green on Tata Consumer, and Titan managed to do well thanks to a pretty good third quarter update that came in. Actually, speaking of Apollo Hospitals, because of a lot of chatter around this HMPV virus, in general, healthcare and diagnostic stocks saw some green. So the likes of ThyroCare, Metropolis, Dr. Lal, Also, thanks to some positive brokerage commentary that came through on some of these names, these stocks were up and about. Important updates coming in, an important reaction in stocks. Nykaa's Q3 update, solid. The stock was positive. Jubilant Foodworks has done well in the third quarter. But again, the gains kind of whittled down by the time we were closing. Dabur is still very cautious on the third quarter. Angel One was reacting to the update. L&T Finance also on the weaker side after the third quarter update. An important mention here is going out to ITC because the stock is finally trading ex the hotels business. That explains the pressure. But it wasn't just that, because in the morning the stock opened about 4.5% down. Then, of course, overall weak market sentiment perhaps chipped in, and finally ITC was lower by about 7 to 8%. Coming back to the overall picture, the fall in India was far more pronounced than what we saw in many of the Asian markets today. While we were trading, European markets were holding up. US futures were also higher. So let's see. FBI selling is the critical watch point. And we now need to see, because the 200 DMA is gone, we now need to see if last week's low of around 23,460 thereabouts, whether that holds for the Nifty or not.
So, Rupee, many thanks for joining us. That was the market action for you. And the rupee continues to fall. It's fallen to a new low against the dollar, pressured by the decline of the Chinese yuan. Strength in the US dollar, higher US yields and rising crude oil prices also weighed on the currency. Lata standing by now to take us through the currency market action. 85.82, that's the dollar rupee. Lata, what is the street telling you?
Well, the dollar index strengthened all of last week, and the expectation was, okay, it's thin market trading. But last week ended with a fresh bout of bad news for the Indian currency, you may say. I mean, it's not bad news, of bearish news, which is that the yuan, which until then was fighting the 7.3 mark, the PBOC was keeping it at 7.28, 7.29 to the dollar. It allowed it to cross 7.3, the renminbi, as of Friday evening by close of trade, and the offshore Chinese yuan, which we call the CNH, went beyond 7.33 to 7.36. So the reaction from the rupee was expected on Monday. Added to it was, of course, that big FPI sell figure which the market got over the weekend of 4,227 crores. There was somehow a hope that when the new allocations come for the new year, it could be positive. Now, therefore, how did the Reserve Bank react? It appeared last week that the Reserve Bank was defending 85.80. Now, this is the market perception, because every time the currency came towards 85, 78, 79, there seemed to be a supply of dollars. But given the ecosystem today, rising crude prices, selling by FPIs, as well as the US dollar going to 109 index, the yuan falling, given the concomitant of circumstances, it appears that the Reserve Bank let go the 85.80 level. The currency went all the way to 85.84 in intraday trade and finished around 85.82, 83. It appears that some of the immediate causes may be over. For instance, the yuan, it may have expended and gone over. A further weakening perhaps is likely only after the Trump swearing in and announcements. But that chatter is not uniform. There are some in the market who believe even a 7.4 before the Trump swearing in cannot be ruled out. And therefore, we cannot say with certainty that the bad news is over as far as the rupee is concerned. It does look that it will track everything. It will track how the US yields are going. At the moment, it looks like the dollar index has moved back from 109 to 108.5. But there is enough pressure on the rupee in terms of other factors like the yuan and the equity selling.
Lata, many thanks. That is the currency market action. And let's talk about specific stocks now. ITC shares opened at a discount of 26 rupees to Friday's closing price. This after the cigarette to FMCG company spun off its hotels business into a separate entity. ITC Hotels is expected to list by the middle of February. Shareholders will receive 1 share of the hotels business for every 10 shares of ITC. Mangalam is standing by with more on this much anticipated demerger. Mangalam.
Yeah, so if you look at the ITC stock price today, the cut that we've seen does not entirely reflect the market sentiment. A large part of that is by virtue of the 9 to 10 a.m. special session that took place today to discover the price of ITC Hotels itself. So if you look at the opening price today and the closing price yesterday, you would realize that the stock opened lower by 26 rupees per share, and that's the value that the street believes it has ascribed to the hotel business itself. More analysts on the street were expecting this range to be between 15 to 20 rupees. But, if you consider this difference as the final value for the hotel business, as of today, then, it is a little higher than what the street was anticipating. Proof of this, however, will be the day the hotel business lists, which is somewhere mid-February, what the expectations are given the timelines that the company is given. Just to jog your memory once again, ITC Hotels has about 130 properties with 13,000 rooms, and the company is looking at close to around 180 hotels with almost 18,000 rooms by 2030, two-thirds of that being managed. And if you look at the valuations at which all the hotel stocks trade, the street believes that, ITC's place in terms of a multiple could be somewhere between Chalet Hotels and Indian Hotels, which is a leader, and at a premium to the sector itself at 37 times. But given the difference of yesterday's close and today's open, that 26 rupee mark, values the ITC hotel business at close to around 54,000, but that's an implied value. What we really need to look at is the listing of the hotels business that happens mid-February. If valuations of 26 to 28 times are something to go by, then that share could list anywhere between 175 to 190 rupees a piece.
All right, Mangala, many thanks for joining us. The major PSU bank stocks fell in trade today on the back of their third quarter business update. Shares of Union Bank of India down over 7% after its deposits declined by 2% on a quarterly basis. Indian Bank's deposit growth also declined by 1.3% on a quarterly basis, and Bank of Baroda's deposits grew by a modest 2% from the previous quarter. All the stocks closing deep in the red. Now, top FMCG companies have given their quarterly business update as well. Shares of Dabur traded in losses after the company said that it was cautious on the general trade segment. The FMCG company said its consolidated revenue might have grown in low single digits in December. It also expects flat profit growth on a yearly basis. Now, shares of Marico also slipping as the company expressed concerns over muted gross margins due to higher inflation in copra and vegetable oil prices. The company expects a modest operating profit growth for Q3 as a result of expansion, investment and brand building. Now, Ease My Trip co-founder Nishant Pitti says neither he nor his family will sell any more stake in the company this year. Remember, Pitti sold 1.4% stake in the company to meet, in his words, personal strategic requirements last Thursday. Interestingly, the term sheet for this exercise had mentioned that a 14% stake was on the block. However, Pitti tells CNBC-TV18 that he never planned to sell his entire holding in the company. He also resigned as CEO of Ease My Trip last week, and the post was filled by his brother Rikant Pitti, who serves as CFO. However, Nishant has since moved into the role of chairman, where he says he will focus on driving the company's international expansion plans. Take a look.
The initial intent was 10% of the block which I hold. That is 14%, 1.5% of the 10%, 1.4% of 14%. And as I told you, we still own almost 50% of the equity. This will be holding up. We can't just give you some timeline, but still, we are not selling anything right now. And that could be, you can say, in 2025, we are not going to sell anything.
Well, that's Ease My Trip's Nishant Pitti. The government will launch the second round of PLI scheme for the steel sector. Sources tell us the total outlay would be around 4,300 crores. The revised scheme is aimed at boosting manufacturing of specialty steel and electrical steel. Remember, the first PLI scheme with an outlay of 6,300 crore rupees attracted investments worth 18,300 crores. And sticking with PLI, the Finance Ministry is learned to have approved an incentive scheme for electronic component with an outlay of 25,000 crores. Sources tell us the Ministry of Electronics and IT may consider expanding the scheme's outlay depending on the response it receives. Remember, the industry has sought a higher outlay of 40,000 crore rupees. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. In Court Corner, the Supreme Court has directed the Karnataka High Court to hear all competition-related cases against Amazon and Flipkart. The Competition Commission of India had sought to move all the cases pending in multiple high courts to the Supreme Court. Now, it contended that parallel proceedings in courts could lead to conflicting orders. However, this move was opposed by both Amazon and Flipkart. The Karnataka High Court will now hear the cases from the 15th of January. Facebook's parent company Meta has moved the NCLAT, challenging a CCI order that imposed a 213 crore rupee penalty in relation to WhatsApp's 2021 privacy policy update. The NCLAT will now hear the case on the 16th of January. The competition regulator has alleged that Meta abused its dominant market position with the implementation of the privacy policy. Meta and WhatsApp were also asked to implement specific remedies within a defined timeline. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has defended the proposed law requiring parental consent for those below the age of 18 to access social media and e-commerce platforms. Speaking to CNBC-TV18, the minister said that India does not need data protection laws similar to Europe, which he believes have stifled competition. Take a look.
If there is a bank account or any payment mechanism that a child is using, already there is a digital footprint available.
Sure.
So we have created a mechanism using virtual tokens and using the existing digital architecture. We should be able to have a seamless shift towards a digital compliance method in which we don't have to nobody should be required to go and say that, okay, this is my date of birth and this is, right? So all that stuff has been very well thought through and the industry has been consulted. Industry is on board on this. They believe that this structure that we have created here, where we use the existing digital architecture and we provide a verifiable parental consent framework using the existing digital architecture will work very well. And that's very important also, because in today's world, there's a big possibility of harm coming to children because of the exposure to a variety of platforms. So that's why it's very important that the benefits continue to accrue while the harms can be prevented.
Well, that is Ashwini Vaishnav there on the new rules, the draft rules of the data protection law. Up next, the Union Health Ministry says there is no link between cases of the HMPV virus detected in Bengaluru and the infections being reported in China. We'll be joined by ICMR's former head epidemiologist, Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar, as we try and separate the facts from fiction. Back after a moment. Now, the Union Health Ministry says there is no link between the cases of the HMPV virus that's been detected in Bengaluru and the infections reported in China. 2 infants who have contracted the virus in Bengaluru have no international travel history. 1 infant is recovered and has been discharged, and another is recovering, as per health officials. Now, HMPV is a common virus and was first isolated in 2001. Archana is standing by now to take us through the details. Archana, take us through the details that we know of the HMPV virus, its symptoms and its prevalence.
Well, as you mentioned, this virus is not new. It was first isolated in Netherlands in 2001. But HMPV has gained attention amid a surge in cases, particularly among children under the age of 14 in northern China. Now, as the government has reiterated, currently there's no need to panic regarding the spread of this virus, and the Karnataka government has also reiterated that it's monitoring the situation closely in coordination with the health ministry. So what is this virus that everyone is talking about? Human metapneumovirus, HMPV. It's a respiratory illness with flu-like symptoms, and it's more common during the winter season, especially among the younger and older age groups with weak immune system. It can spread from an infected individual to others through coughing, sneezing, or personal contact. It's not limited to just China, but it's also prevalent across most Asian countries. The symptoms include cough, fever, nasal congestion, sore throat, and shortness of breath. Now, what are the precautions that people must take? Well, according to the Karnataka Health Department's guidelines, a lot of it is already known as public personal hygiene, but let's reiterate for our viewers. Now, people have been advised to cover their mouth and nose with a handkerchief or a tissue paper while coughing or sneezing. They should wash their hands often with soap or water and clean it with sanitizer. They should avoid crowded places, stay away from public places while having a fever, cough or sneezing. Unlike COVID-19, there is no vaccine or specific antiviral treatment for HMPV. Back to you.
All right, Archana, appreciate you joining us. And to take this discussion forward, we're now joined by Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar, the former head scientist of the Epidemiology and Communicable Diseases Division at the Indian Council of Medical Research. Dr. Gangakhedkar was also the face of the ICMR in government briefings during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and was a very regular guest here on CNBC-TV18. Dr. Gangakhedkar, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us again here on CNBC-TV18. Let me start by asking you, sir, whether this is a cause for concern, it is a cause for panic. panic? What would you like our viewers to know about this particular virus?
What is most important is people do not know that this virus was present in India for a fairly long period of time. This virus has a prevalence rate of almost 4% across countries in the world. If you look at a publication that came from National Institute of Virology, it shows you very clearly that among patients who are having acute respiratory infection, now this is a story of 2016 to 18,
Right.
among them, the prevalence is 3.4%. Among those who get admitted with severe respiratory infection, which we used to call then during COVID times and even now as SARI cases, it goes down to close to about 2.6%. Now, this virus is known to exist. There is no reason to believe, since there are no publications from China, that it has mutated enough to increase the mortality or morbidity that is associated with
Right.
any virus. So there is no reason for us to fear at this point in time and create this kind of panic, which is unnecessary to my mind.
Yeah. Yes. So importantly, what you're saying is that this is not a new virus. It has been prevalent in large parts of the world, including here in India, for several years now. And at this point in time, there is no evidence to suggest that there is any mutation that's taken place of the cases that are being reported about in China. So no cause for panic or alarm just yet. Of course, it's always good to be vigilant. But Dr. Ganga Khetkar, the next question then is, and this is what everybody is reacting and responding to now, should we get tested? The question is, what should you get tested for, and what tests are we even talking about?
You can do RT-PCR to diagnose it. You can do a test which detects, I would not name because it is not considered as ethical in our profession. Some names tend to exist where you can test any kind of virus. But do I need that test? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because as I said, the risk of mortality or severe disease is so low that there is no reason for us to unnecessarily go for testing everybody, whoever has this kind of milder symptoms per se. What is also important to remember is, as I said, this infection occurs in India. It tends to occur in winter season. Now, even winter season is almost at the end of its own slot, no?
Yeah.
In terms of weather. Why am I panicking? I really don't understand. There is no reason.
Well, yes, and that is why we're bringing experts here to speak about this to our viewers. And you're essentially saying that at this point in time, please don't go out rushing to find tests and so on and so forth. Only unless your symptoms are severe will a doctor prescribe any particular kind of further investigation for you. So don't go around looking or go out and start doing RT-PCR tests, etc. That's what Dr. Ganga Khetkar is advising at this point in time, which also brings us then to the question of the kind of symptoms associated with this. In fact, all the publications that I've been looking at from Cleveland Clinic and so on and so forth, the symptoms are pretty much similar to a common cold, and in very few cases do they result in severe illness. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, this test, even if it is done among patients who have severe acute respiratory infection and they get admitted, we must remember this could be a concurrent infection. The person must be having some other disease. So there, perhaps you may do it, but this particular infection is unlikely to cause a major problem. And that's something which we have to keep on informing people. And what is most important is everybody has to understand one thing. During even COVID time, which occurred incidentally in December, as it was reported from China, and the fact that the reports are coming from China, just social media is influencing our thinking so much that we are panicking for no reason. I think it is time the government has taken all kinds of right steps. What is also important is we have to devise strategies as to how to handle social media at this juncture, because perhaps social media related messages travel faster than viral.
Yes, that certainly is a challenge that you speak of, Dr. Ganga Khedkar. But what we can do, of course, is to put out information, to put out facts, to put out expert opinion like yours that will help our viewers make better informed decisions. So at this point in time, as Dr. Ganga Khedkar is very clearly articulating, this is not a Chinese virus. This is a virus that is prevalent in large parts of the world and has been prevalent in India. And this is something that we need to be mindful of, but this is certainly not something that requires us to push panic buttons just yet. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue here on CNBC TV18. We're back in a moment with more.